You're listening to The Night Watchman, where the stories may sound fictional, but the fear feels real. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now turn off the lights, lock your doors, and don't stop listening. I still have the receipt. That is the part I can't explain. It's faded now, the ink almost completely gone, but I can still read the date at the top. October 17th, 2024. And underneath it, in tiny black letters, Costco Wholesale, Store 418. The problem is that Store 418 closed permanently 11 years ago. I know because I work there. My name is Daniel Carter, and in October 2024, I was 29 years old, recently divorced, drowning in debt, and desperate enough to take a night security job at a Costco outside a small town in Pennsylvania. It wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just 12-hour shifts, walk the aisles, check emergency exits, watch the cameras, make sure nobody was sleeping inside the building after closing. The pay was good, and at that point in my life, good pay was enough. I didn't know that the first night I walked through those warehouse doors would eventually become the reason I stopped sleeping with my bedroom door open. The first strange thing happened during my orientation. My supervisor, a gray-haired man named Frank Miller, gave me a ring of keys and said, "Whatever you do, don't open door 17 after midnight." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh. "What's behind it?" "Old inventory storage." "Then why can't I open it?" Frank looked at me for several seconds. "Because there's nothing behind it." I smiled. He didn't. Then he walked away. I should have quit right there. But I needed the money. My daughter Emily was 6 years old, and after my divorce, I had promised her I would never miss another birthday. Promises are expensive when you're broke. So I stayed. My first few nights were completely normal. At 10 p.m., the Costco closed. Customers disappeared. The employees left. The parking lot became empty except for my truck and the occasional car passing on the highway. By midnight, the warehouse was unbelievably quiet. You don't realize how loud a Costco is during the day until you hear it empty. The refrigeration units hummed, metal shelves creaked, air conditioning ducts clicked. Every sound traveled forever. On my fourth night, around 11:10 p.m., I was sitting in the security office watching the cameras when I noticed something strange. Camera 17 had gone black. I picked up the radio. "Frank, camera 17 is down." There was a pause, then Frank answered, "Leave it." "Should I reset it?" "No." His voice sounded different, almost nervous. "Just leave it." At 11:17 p.m., I heard something over the radio, a child laughing. I froze. Then a little girl's voice whispered, "Daddy?" I immediately thought of Emily. I grabbed the radio. "Who is that?" Static. Then the voice came again. "Daddy, I'm cold." I stood up so fast that my chair rolled backward. I checked every camera. Nothing. Empty aisles, empty checkout lanes, empty parking lot. I called Frank. No answer. Then I heard 3 knocks. Not from the door. From somewhere inside the warehouse. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 I walked into the main warehouse carrying my flashlight. The lights above me flickered. I followed the sound toward the back. And that's when I saw door 17. It was standing open. I remembered Frank's warning. Don't open door 17 after midnight. But it wasn't midnight. It was 11:19. I told myself that meant the rule didn't apply. I stepped inside. There was no storage room. There was a hallway. A long, narrow hallway that shouldn't have existed inside the building. The walls were painted white. Old fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. And hanging from the ceiling were Costco price signs. But the prices were wrong. $1.99 milk, $2.49 bread, $4.99 gasoline. Prices from decades ago. I took one step forward, then another. At the end of the hallway was a small table. On the table was a cardboard box. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, families shopping, employees smiling, children sitting in shopping carts, birthday parties, Christmas dinners, people I had never seen. Then I found a photograph of myself. I dropped it. It showed me standing in the same hallway. But I was older, much older. Gray hair, wrinkles, and beside me was Emily. Except Emily looked like a grown woman. I picked up the photograph with shaking hands. On the back was written October 17th, 2039. 30 seconds later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Nothing. Then I heard a little girl whisper, "Daddy?" I ran. I slammed through door 17 and locked it. When I returned to the security office, Frank was waiting. He looked at me. "You opened it." I nodded. He closed his eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that." "What is that place?" Frank didn't answer. I grabbed his arm. "What is it?" He finally whispered, "It's where the people went." "What people?" "The ones who never made it home." I stared at him. Frank sat down. Then he told me the story. 11 years earlier, on October 17th, 2013, the Costco had been packed. A storm had knocked out power across the area. During the blackout, an electrical fire started near the loading docks. The building was evacuated, but 7 people never came out. A mother, her 2 children, 2 employees, an elderly man, and a little girl named Lily. The fire department searched for hours. They found no bodies, no clothing, nothing. The building was eventually closed, and 6 months later, demolished. But according to Frank, the new Costco was built on the exact same property. "Every October 17th, he said, the old store comes back." I laughed nervously. "That's impossible." Frank looked at me. "Then why did you see the hallway?" I had no answer. He continued, "It opens at 11:17 p.m. and closes at midnight." "What happens at midnight?" Frank looked toward camera 17. "You don't want to know." I decided I was done. I told Frank I was quitting. He didn't stop me. Instead, he said something I still remember. "Take your daughter somewhere else tomorrow." I stopped. "What?" "Don't bring her near this place." I left. The next morning, I picked Emily up from school. She ran toward me. "Daddy!" I hugged her harder than usual. Then she pulled something from her backpack. "Look what I found." It was a photograph. My blood turned cold. It was the same photograph I had found inside door 17, except now Emily was holding it. "Where did you get this?" "At school." "Who gave it to you?" She shrugged. "A little girl." "What little girl?" "Lily." My hands started shaking. "What did she look like?" Emily thought for a moment. She was wearing a red jacket. That night, I searched online for Lily. I found an old newspaper article. "Local child still missing after Costco fire." Her name was Lily Harper, age 7, red jacket, last seen inside the store. I couldn't sleep. At 11:17 p.m., my phone rang. It was the Costco. I stared at the screen, then answered. Nobody spoke. I could hear breathing. Then a child whispered, "Daddy?" I hung up. The phone rang again. I ignored it. Again, again, again. Then a text message appeared. "She's here." I immediately looked toward Emily's bedroom. Her door was open. Her bed was empty. I ran downstairs. The front door was unlocked. Outside, my truck was running, and Emily was sitting in the passenger seat. I ran to her. She looked at me calmly. "Daddy, Lily wants to go home." I grabbed her. "Who is Lily?" Emily pointed toward the road. A little girl was standing beneath the streetlight. Red jacket, pale face, 7 years old. She smiled. Then she disappeared. I drove straight to the Costco. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me believed Lily wanted answers. Maybe because I was a father. I parked outside at 11:05 p.m. The building looked normal. At 11:17, every light inside turned on. But the Costco sign outside changed. For a few seconds, I could see an older sign beneath it. Costco Wholesale, Store 418. I took Emily's hand. We entered. The doors opened by themselves. Inside was the old Costco. Not the store I knew, the store from 2013. People were walking around shopping, talking, laughing, but none of them had faces. Emily squeezed my hand. "Daddy, don't look at them." Then we heard Lily. "Over here." She was standing near the bakery. We followed her. She led us to the back. Door 17 was open. Inside was the hallway, but this time there were doors on both sides, hundreds of them. Behind each door someone was calling a name. Mom, Michael, Sarah, Daddy. Lily stopped. She turned toward me. I waited for my dad. What happened to him? He left without me. I looked at her. Why? She pointed toward the end of the hallway. There was a man standing there. He looked terrified. It was Frank, but he was much younger. He was wearing an employee uniform from 2013. He looked at me, then at Lily, and began crying. I'm sorry, he whispered. Lily walked toward him. Frank dropped to his knees. I thought you were behind me. Lily hugged him, and suddenly the hallway began shaking. The lights flickered. The doors slammed open. Thousands of voices screamed at once. Frank looked at me. Run! I grabbed Emily. We ran. Behind us, the entire hallway seemed to collapse. I heard Lily screaming. Then Frank screamed. Then silence. We reached door 17. I pushed it open. We fell onto the Costco floor. The lights were normal. The warehouse was empty. My watch read 11:59 p.m. 1 minute later, everything disappeared. Door 17 was gone. There was only a concrete wall. The police later found no evidence. They told me Emily and I had entered an abandoned section of the building, but there was something they couldn't explain. The security footage showed us walking into the store. It showed us leaving. But between those moments, the cameras recorded nothing, not even static. I quit the job the next day. The Costco remained open, but every October 17th, it closes early. At least that's what the official schedule says. Because sometimes at exactly 11:17 p.m., people driving past the highway say they see an old Costco building where the parking lot should be. And sometimes they see people inside. Families, employees, children, all shopping, all waiting. A few months ago, Emily asked me something. Daddy, do you remember Lily? I told her yes. She looked at me strangely. Then she said, she says thank you. I asked her where Lily was. Emily pointed toward the window. There was nobody outside. Then she whispered, she doesn't need to wait anymore. That night, I checked the photograph again. The one I had kept hidden in a drawer. The date on the back had changed. It no longer said 2039. It said October 17th, 2026, and underneath it was a new line. Daniel Carter, employee, I haven't told anyone. But tonight is October 17th, and my clock just changed to 11:16 p.m. My phone has started ringing. The caller ID says Costco, store 418. I can hear someone knocking at my front door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. And from the other side of the door, a little girl is whispering my name. Daddy. I never had a son. I never had another daughter, and Lily has been dead for 13 years. So if you're listening to this right now, check the time, because if it's 11:17 p.m., don't open the door. Story 2. I never believed the stories people told about Costco after midnight. I used to work the overnight maintenance shift at a Costco warehouse outside Portland, Oregon. It was one of those huge stores surrounded by empty parking lots, pine trees, and industrial buildings. During the day, the place was packed with families pushing oversized carts. At night, it became completely different. The store was enormous. Too enormous. There were aisles where you could walk for almost a minute without seeing another person. I took the job because I needed money. My wife, Emily, had passed away 8 months earlier, leaving me alone with our 6-year-old daughter, Lily. After the funeral, I couldn't stay at my old job. Everything reminded me of Emily. So when Costco offered me an overnight maintenance position, I accepted immediately. The shift was from 10:30 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most nights were boring. Clean the bathrooms, check the refrigeration units, empty trash, fix leaking pipes, make sure the emergency exits were locked, and every morning at exactly 6:45, I would sit in the employee break room, drink terrible coffee, and look at the photograph of Emily that I kept inside my wallet. I told myself I was working nights because of Lily, but honestly, I think I was running away from the silence at home. My supervisor was a man named Ray. He had worked at that Costco for almost 20 years. He was the kind of guy who remembered everything. One night while we were checking the security cameras, Ray said something that I didn't understand. If you ever hear a shopping cart moving in the back receiving area after 2 a.m., don't follow it. I laughed. Why? Ray didn't laugh. Because there aren't supposed to be any carts back there. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Seriously, he said. If you hear one, call me. You're telling me Costco has haunted shopping carts? Ray looked at me for several seconds. Then he said quietly, I'm telling you that some things in this building aren't meant to be found. That was the first strange thing. The second happened 3 nights later. It was 2:17 a.m. I was cleaning the men's restroom when I heard it. Clack, 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 a shopping cart wheel. I froze. Clack, clack, clack. It was coming from the receiving area. I immediately remembered Ray's warning. I checked my phone. 2:18 a.m. I called him. No answer. I called again. Nothing. The sound continued. Clack, clack, clack. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the back. The receiving area was completely dark. I switched on the lights. Nothing. No cart, no employee, no movement. Then I noticed something strange. One of the large steel doors was open. It wasn't one of the normal emergency exits. I'd never seen it before. The door was narrow and painted gray. There was no Costco sign on it, just a small black number, B17. I walked closer. Cold air came through the opening, not normal warehouse air. It smelled like wet concrete and pine trees. I should have called Ray. Instead, I pushed the door open. Behind it was a hallway. That made no sense. The Costco warehouse had no hallway there. I knew the building layout. I had worked there for 6 months. But the hallway stretched deep into darkness. The walls were made of old concrete. The floor was wet. And on the wall were faded yellow arrows. I took one step inside, then another. My flashlight flickered. At the end of the hallway, I saw something. A shopping cart. It was standing completely still. I walked toward it. There was something inside. A small pink backpack. My heart stopped, because I recognized it. It was Lily's backpack, the same one she had taken to school that morning, the one currently sitting beside our front door at home. I grabbed the cart. The moment my hand touched it, the lights in the hallway went out. Total darkness. Then I heard a little girl's voice behind me. Daddy? I couldn't breathe. It was Lily. Exactly Lily's voice. Daddy, please don't leave me. I turned around. Nothing. Then the voice came again. Daddy! I ran. I don't remember how I got back through the door. I slammed it shut and locked it. When I looked at the clock, it was 2:31. Only 13 minutes had passed. I went straight to the security office. Ray was sitting there, awake, waiting for me. His face looked pale. You opened B17, he said. I couldn't speak. He sighed. I told you not to. I asked him what it was. He stared at the security monitors. Then he said, there used to be another building here. What? Before Costco. He explained that decades earlier, the property had been occupied by a distribution warehouse. In 1998, there had been an accident. A section of the building collapsed during a winter storm. 3 employees died. One of them was a young woman named Sarah. She had been working overnight. Her 5-year-old daughter was waiting for her in the parking lot. Sarah never came out. According to Ray, the company eventually demolished the building. Years later, Costco was constructed on the same property. But the basement remained, Ray said. There was a basement? He nodded. Most of it was filled with concrete. Most? Ray looked at me. Except B17. I asked him why Costco hadn't sealed it. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened an old folder. Inside were photographs. One showed the original warehouse. Another showed the collapsed section. The final photograph showed a concrete hallway, the exact hallway I just walked through. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten sentence. Do not answer when they use your family's voice. I stared at it. Then I remembered the voice. Daddy? I asked Ray if anyone else had heard it. He said yes. Over the years, several overnight employees had reported hearing voices from B17, but there was something worse. People who entered the hallway sometimes disappeared. Ray told me about a security guard who vanished in 2007. A maintenance worker disappeared in 2014, and a temporary employee disappeared just 2 months before I started working there. No bodies, no explanation, nothing. I asked Ray why he still worked there. He looked at the photograph of Sarah. Because someone has to make sure that door stays closed. The next night, B17 was locked. At least that's what I thought. At 2:17 a.m., the shopping cart sound returned. Clack, clack, clack. This time I stayed in the security office. I watched the cameras. The receiving area was empty. Then camera 14 went black. Camera 15 went black. Camera 16 went black. One after another. Finally, the camera facing B17 flickered back on, and I saw someone standing in front of the door. It was a woman, long dark hair, white shirt, bare feet. She was facing away from the camera. I grabbed the radio. Ray? Static. Then his voice came through. Don't leave the office. Ray, there's someone by B17. Silence. Then he whispered, I know. The woman slowly turned around. Her face wasn't visible. Instead, she was holding something. A photograph. She lifted it toward the camera. It was a picture of me, with Lily, taken outside my house. I had never seen that photograph before. I stood frozen. Then the woman pointed toward the security camera and smiled. The camera went black. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps outside the office. Slow, wet footsteps. Step, step, step. Someone stopped directly outside the door. Then Lily's voice came from the hallway. Daddy? I covered my mouth. The voice became desperate. Daddy, I'm scared. I didn't move. Then another voice joined it. Emily's voice. David. My entire body went cold. Emily had been dead for 8 months. David, open the door. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to open it. God, I wanted to. But I remembered the warning. Don't answer when they use your family's voice. I stayed silent. The handle slowly turned. Once, twice, then stopped. For almost 5 minutes, nothing happened. Finally, the footsteps disappeared. When morning came, Ray found me sitting on the floor. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something I'll never forget. You're not supposed to hear Emily. What does that mean? He looked terrified. It means it knows you now. I quit that morning. I never went back. For weeks, nothing happened. Then one night at 2:17 a.m., my daughter woke me up. She was standing beside my bed, crying. Daddy, I sat up. What happened? She pointed toward the bedroom window. There's a woman outside. My blood went cold. I slowly looked toward the window. Nothing, just darkness. Then Lily whispered, she keeps asking me where the Costco door is. I couldn't move. Who? Lily looked at me. The woman. I pulled her close. Did she say anything else? Lily nodded. She said you left her there. I stared at my daughter. Who did? Lily's face changed. She looked confused, then frightened. Daddy. What? She whispered. Why does she look like Mommy? I never slept normally again. 3 months later, the Costco warehouse was demolished. Officially, the reason was structural redevelopment. But Ray called me the night before. He said workers had discovered something beneath the building, a concrete hallway, and at the end of it, a door. B17. They opened it. Behind the door, investigators found an old shopping cart. Inside was a pink backpack, Lily's backpack, the same backpack that had been sitting in my house for 3 months. I still have it. I never told the police about it. I never told anyone. Because there was one thing inside that backpack that wasn't Lily's. A photograph. It showed me standing in the Costco receiving area, taken from behind, and written on the back were 6 words, you should have opened the door. Sometimes at exactly 2:17 in the morning, I still hear it. Clack, clack, clack. A shopping cart rolling somewhere outside my house, and every time I hear it, Lily wakes up crying, because she hears it too. But last night something changed. The sound stopped outside my bedroom. Then I heard 3 quiet knocks on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. And a woman's voice whispered from the other side, David! It was Emily. Then she said something I had never heard her say before. Thank you for leaving the door open. I looked toward the hallway. The front door was still locked, but beneath it, a thin line of cold air was coming into the house. And on the floor, slowly appearing in the darkness, were wet footprints. They led from the front door straight toward Lily's bedroom. I ran, but before I reached her room, I heard my daughter scream, "Daddy!" I opened the door. Lily was sitting on her bed. The window was open, and beside her stood a woman with long dark hair. She looked at me. She smiled. Then she whispered, "You finally brought her to me." The lights went out, and somewhere in the darkness, a shopping cart began rolling. Clack, clack, clack. This time it wasn't coming from Costco. It was coming from inside my house. Story 3, I was working the overnight shift at a Costco outside Tacoma, Washington, when I found a receipt for a woman who had been dead for 11 years. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because I was standing near the employee entrance, drinking terrible vending machine coffee and waiting for my supervisor, Mark, to finish his paperwork. The warehouse was supposed to be empty. That was the rule after midnight. No customers, no deliveries, no one except the overnight crew. But from somewhere deep inside the store, I heard a shopping cart rolling, slowly. One wheel squeaked every few seconds. Squeak, pause, squeak, pause. I looked toward the giant aisles of stacked boxes. "Mark?" No answer. I assumed one of the night crew had forgotten something. Then the cart stopped, and a woman's voice whispered from the darkness, "Excuse me." I froze. "Can you help me find my daughter?" I should have walked away. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight. My name is Daniel Miller. At the time, I was 29, recently divorced, and working nights because I needed the extra money. My mother had died 6 months earlier. My little sister, Emily, was the only person in my family I still talked to regularly. That mattered because for the first few weeks after my mother's funeral, I barely slept. Working overnight at Costco gave me something I desperately needed: silence. Nobody asked questions. Nobody expected me to smile. I could disappear behind pallets of bottled water and boxes of cereal for 8 hours at a time. So when I heard that woman's voice, my first thought wasn't ghosts. It was that someone had somehow gotten inside. I walked toward the electronics section. "Ma'am?" Nothing. I turned the corner. The aisle was empty, but there was a shopping cart sitting in the middle of the floor. Inside it was a single red sweater. I stared at it. The sweater looked old. Not dirty, just old. Then I noticed something hanging from the handle, a receipt. I picked it up. The date printed at the top was November 14th, 2015, 11 years earlier. The items were strange: baby formula, a flashlight, batteries, a blanket, and one box of children's cereal. At the bottom was a handwritten note: "Please don't let her leave without me." I called Mark. He finally answered. "What's wrong?" "I found a cart." "So? There's a receipt in it. What about it?" I told him the date. There was silence. Then Mark said something that made my stomach tighten. "Daniel, and put the receipt down." "Why?" "Just do it." I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Mark was standing at the end of the aisle. His face had gone completely white. He walked toward me, took the receipt from my hand, and folded it twice. "Where did you find this?" "Electronics." He looked toward the dark aisle. Then he whispered, "Did you hear anything?" I didn't answer. His expression changed. "You heard her, didn't you?" I nodded. Mark closed his eyes. "My brother worked here in 2015. I waited. He was one of the overnight employees." "What happened?" Mark looked down at the receipt. "A woman came in with her daughter." He swallowed. "She never left." According to Mark, the woman was named Sarah Whitmore. She was 32. Her daughter Lily was 6. Sarah had been going through a brutal custody battle with her ex-husband. On November 14th, she brought Lily shopping late at night. Security cameras showed them entering around 11:43 p.m. At 12:06, Sarah disappeared from the main camera area. Lily was seen walking alone near the frozen food section. Then the cameras went black for 13 minutes. When they came back on, Lily was gone too. Police searched the warehouse. They searched the parking lot. They searched nearby woods. Nothing. Sarah and Lily were never found, but Mark's brother had told police something strange. He said that around 2 a.m., he heard a woman asking for help. Then he heard a little girl crying. He followed the sound toward the back of the warehouse. And that's where he found something. A door. A door that wasn't supposed to exist. It was behind a row of industrial shelving. A small gray metal door. No sign, no handle. Just a keypad. His brother said he tried opening it. The keypad displayed one word. Cold. Then the lights went out. He ran. 3 days later, he quit. I thought Mark was telling me an old employee story until we heard the cart. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. It was moving again. This time it was coming toward us. Mark grabbed my arm. Don't look down the aisle. Why? Because if you see Lily, he stopped. What happens? She sees you too. The cart rolled into view. There was nobody pushing it. The red sweater was gone. Instead, there was a little girl's shoe inside. Pink, small, wet. I stared at it. Then I heard a child whisper behind me. Are you my dad? I turned. A little girl was standing at the end of the aisle. 6 years old. Pale face, dark hair, pink jacket. Exactly like the photograph Mark later showed me. Lily Whitmore. She smiled and pointed behind me. Mom's waiting. I didn't move. Mark whispered, Daniel, don't turn around. I heard breathing directly behind my ear, then a woman's voice. You found her. The lights went out. I don't remember running. I only remember crashing into the employee entrance and hitting the emergency door so hard that the alarm started screaming. When the police arrived, the warehouse was empty. No woman, no child, no cart, no red sweater, nothing. Mark refused to talk about it. I quit 2 days later. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a Costco receipt. The date was that night. The items listed were 1 blanket, 2 flashlights, batteries, children's cereal, and a red sweater. At the bottom, someone had written, You left her there. I threw it away. The next morning, it was sitting on my kitchen table. I called Mark. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I received a voicemail. It was Mark. He sounded terrified. Daniel, listen to me. A pause. If you get another receipt, don't read the bottom. Then a woman's voice came through the recording. Too late. Mark never came to work again. I later learned he had moved to Oregon. I never spoke to him again. For almost a year, nothing happened. I got remarried. I moved to another apartment. I stopped working nights. I convinced myself that grief and exhaustion had made me imagine things. Then one winter evening, my daughter asked me a question. She was 4 years old. We were eating dinner when she suddenly looked toward the hallway. Daddy? Yeah? Why is that little girl standing there? I couldn't breathe. What little girl? She pointed toward the hallway. The one with the pink jacket. I turned. Nothing. Then my daughter smiled. She says she wants her cereal. The room became completely silent. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I walked into the hallway. There was nobody there. But on the floor was a small pink shoe. Wet. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I drove back to that Costco. I don't know why. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. The warehouse looked exactly the same. I walked inside, I found an employee and asked about the old incident. He had no idea what I was talking about, so I went to the back, behind the industrial shelving. The gray metal door was still there, but now there was something different. A small sign had been attached to it. Employees only. I entered the code written on the old receipt, 1114. The door unlocked. Inside was a narrow concrete hallway. Cold air poured out. I walked forward. My flashlight flickered. At the end of the hallway was a room. There were dozens of shopping carts inside. Each one contained something. A child's shoe, a blanket, a toy, a photograph, a receipt. And on the far wall were names. Hundreds of them. Some were old, some were recent. I found Sarah Whitmore. Under her name was Lily, and beneath Lily's name was another name. Mine, Daniel Miller. 2026. I stepped backward. The door slammed shut. Then I heard a little girl's voice behind me. Daddy? I turned. Lily was standing there. She was holding my daughter's hand, and she looked exactly the same as the night I saw her. 6 years old. She smiled. Then Sarah stepped out of the darkness. She looked exhausted, almost human. She whispered, "We've been waiting for someone to take us home." I looked at my daughter. She wasn't there anymore. The woman smiled. "She already is." I ran toward the door. Behind me, Lily started crying. "Daddy, don't leave me again." I stopped. That sentence broke something inside me. Because my mother used to say the same thing when I was a child. Not those exact words, but the same feeling, the same guilt, the same fear of being abandoned. I turned around. Sarah was gone. Lily was gone. My daughter was standing beside the door, alive, crying. I grabbed her hand and ran. We escaped. Police found me sitting in my car outside the warehouse, holding my daughter. I never told them about the room. I couldn't, because when they searched the warehouse, there was no gray door, no hallway, no carts, nothing. But there was one thing they did find, a receipt on the windshield of my car. I didn't touch it. I didn't read it. I already knew what it said. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized, were 5 words. "Thank you for bringing her home." It's been 3 years. My daughter is 7 now. She doesn't remember any of it. At least that's what she tells me. But sometimes when we're shopping somewhere late at night, she suddenly grabs my hand and she whispers, "Daddy, don't go down that aisle." Last week it happened again. We were inside a Costco. It was crowded, bright, completely normal. My daughter stopped walking. She stared toward the back of the store. Then she looked at me. "Daddy?" "What?" She pointed. "There she is." My heart stopped. I looked. At the end of the aisle stood a little girl in a pink jacket. She was holding a red sweater. She smiled at me. Then she slowly lifted one finger to her lips, and behind her, the lights began going out, one by one, until the entire aisle was dark. My daughter squeezed my hand. "Daddy." "What?" she whispered. "Mommy says we forgot someone." Story 4. I used to think the worst thing that could happen during a night shift was getting fired. I was wrong. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in November when I locked the employee entrance of the Costco where I worked outside Tacoma, Washington. The parking lot was almost completely empty. Rain tapped against the windshield of my old Ford, and the giant Costco sign above the building flickered every few seconds. I had worked there for almost 3 years. I knew every aisle, every storage room, every emergency exit, and I knew that after midnight, there was absolutely no reason for anyone to still be inside. At least that's what I believed. My name is Daniel Miller, and what I'm about to tell you is the reason I never work overnight again. That night, my supervisor, Mark, stopped me before I left. "Daniel, can you do me a favor?" I turned around. He was holding a clipboard. "We're short on security tonight. Can you walk the building once before you go?" I laughed. "At midnight? 10 minutes, that's all." I agreed. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking. The store was enormous in the darkness. Without customers, Costco felt completely different. The high ceilings disappeared into shadows. The refrigerators hummed. The fluorescent lights above certain aisles remained on, while others had already switched off. I walked past the televisions, the furniture section, the bakery, the meat coolers. Everything was normal. Then I heard something. A cart, rolling, slowly. I stopped. The sound came from the back of the store. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. "Hello?" No answer. I walked toward the sound. Another squeak. Then silence. I turned the corner and saw an empty shopping cart sitting in the middle of aisle 17. I frowned. I knew that cart hadn't been there earlier. I pushed it against the wall and continued. Then my radio crackled. "Daniel?" It was Mark. "Yeah? Did you find anything?" "No." There was a pause. Then he said something strange. "Don't go near the old freezer." I stopped walking. "What old freezer?" Silence. "Mark?" The radio crackled again. Then his voice returned. "I said don't go near it." The transmission ended. I stared at the radio. I should have left. Instead, curiosity won. Behind the seasonal section was a narrow employee corridor that led to an old storage area. I'd never been inside. The door had a faded sign, "Authorized personnel," only I opened it. The hallway smelled like wet cardboard and something metallic. At the end was a huge walk-in freezer. I immediately noticed something strange. There was a padlock on the outside. Someone had locked it. I stepped closer. Then I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks. From inside. My entire body went cold. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped backward. "Hello?" Nothing. Then, "Daniel?" I froze. The voice was a woman's, and I knew it. It was my mother's voice. My mother had been dead for 6 years. She had died in a hospital room while I held her hand, and yet I heard her clearly from inside that freezer. "Daniel, please." I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the employee entrance. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys twice. I got into my truck and drove home. I didn't sleep. The next morning I called Mark. He sounded nervous. "Did you hear something last night?" I asked. "What did you hear?" "The freezer." Silence. Then Mark whispered, "Forget about it." "Why?" He didn't answer. "Mark," I heard my mother's voice. Another long silence. Finally he said, "You're not the first." I felt my stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" He hung up. I spent the entire day thinking about it. That evening I almost called the police, but I convinced myself that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe a recording was playing. Maybe exhaustion had caused me to hallucinate. Then at 6:13 p.m., Mark called me. His voice was barely audible. "Daniel, don't come in tonight." "Why?" "Because something happened." "What?" He took a breath. "The freezer door was open this morning." I couldn't speak. "Did you check inside?" "Yeah." "And?" "There was nothing." Then he said, "Except footprints." My heart started beating faster. "Whose footprints?" Mark whispered. "They started inside the freezer." I waited, and ended in aisle 17. I remembered the cart. I remembered the sound. Then Mark said something that made everything worse. The footprints were barefoot. I didn't go to work that night. Neither did Mark. The next morning, corporate sent another supervisor. Apparently, they blamed a refrigeration malfunction. They sealed the freezer. Employees were told not to discuss it. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 3 nights later, I received a text message. It came from my mother's old phone number, a number that had been disconnected years ago. The message said, "You left me there." I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then another message arrived. "You promised you wouldn't leave." I couldn't breathe, because those were words my mother had said to me on the night she died. But there was something I had never told anyone. 6 years earlier, my mother had gotten sick while shopping at Costco. She collapsed near the freezer section. I was there. I called an ambulance. She survived that night. But while waiting for the paramedics, she grabbed my hand and said, "Don't leave me." I promised I wouldn't. But when the ambulance arrived, they wouldn't let me ride with her. I went home. She died before morning. For 6 years, I'd blamed myself. That was why hearing her voice in that freezer broke something inside me. Maybe it wasn't a ghost. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe my mind was finally cracking. Then I received the third message, "Come back." I deleted the conversation, blocked the number, and promised myself I'd never return. 2 days later, Mark disappeared. His wife called me. She asked if I knew where he was. I didn't. Then she said, "He went to Costco last night." My blood went cold. I drove there. The store was closed. Police cars were parked outside. I waited until an officer came out. "What happened?" He looked at me. "Do you know Mark Reynolds?" "Yes." "He entered the building around 1:20 a.m. Did you find him?" The officer shook his head. "We found his flashlight." "Where?" He pointed toward the back. "Aisle 17. I felt sick. Then he added, "There's something else." "What?" The officer lowered his voice. "We found a security camera recording." He showed it to me. The footage showed Mark walking toward the freezer. Then the camera flickered. For exactly 3 seconds, the screen went black. When it came back, Mark was gone. But something else stood at the end of aisle 17. A woman, barefoot, wearing an old hospital gown. I couldn't see her face, but I recognized the way she stood. My mother used to stand exactly like that when she was tired. I left before the police could ask more questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Nothing. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Wet. And finally a woman's voice. Daniel. I couldn't move. Mom? She whispered. You promised. The call ended. The next morning I went back to Costco alone. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe grief. Maybe because some part of me needed to know the truth. The store manager let me inside. I walked to aisle 17. The freezer door was still sealed, but something had been written across it in black marker. 4 words. You left me alone. I touched the writing. It was still wet. Then I heard knocking. 3 times. From inside. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped backward. Then a voice whispered through the freezer door. Daniel? I started crying. I'm sorry. Silence. I'm sorry I left. The door handle moved. Slowly. I ran. Behind me, the freezer door opened. I heard bare feet hitting the concrete. 1 step, 2, 3. Then my mother's voice screamed, You promised! I reached the employee entrance. The door wouldn't open. I pulled the handle. Nothing. The footsteps were getting closer. I looked behind me. She stood at the end of the hallway. My mother. But she wasn't the woman I remembered. Her skin was pale. Her hair was soaked. Her hospital gown was covered in dark stains, and her eyes were completely black. She smiled. Then she said, You can leave now. The door suddenly opened. I ran outside. I never went back. Costco eventually removed the old freezer and renovated that section of the store. Mark was never found. The official report says he disappeared somewhere inside the building. But 6 months later, I received one final message. It came from my mother's number. There was only one sentence. I'm not in the freezer anymore. I changed my phone number. I moved to another state. And I never told anyone what really happened until now. Because last week, something happened that I can't explain. I was driving through Oregon when I stopped at a Costco for gas. I hadn't even realized what store it was until I saw the sign. I stood there staring at it. Then I heard a shopping cart rolling behind me, slowly, squeaking across the concrete. I turned around. There was nobody there, only an empty cart, and taped to its handle was a small piece of paper. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. There were 4 words written on it. You still owe me. I dropped it immediately, because underneath those words was something else. A date, my mother's date of death, and tomorrow's date. I haven't slept since. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of the night I heard her voice inside that freezer. And if you're listening to this story late at night, if you hear a shopping cart moving when nobody's around, don't follow it, don't call out. And whatever you do, don't answer if someone you love calls your name from inside a locked door. Because sometimes the dead don't want you to join them. Sometimes they just want you to remember the promise you broke.